Okay, people. So today I am joined by Cameron Beyl,
Beyl.
Cameron
Mhm.
Beyl, and Kyle F. Andrews. Right, we've got the writer, director, and producers of the new film, The Veil. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. How are you both doing?
We're doing pretty well. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank
And
you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
no worries at all. No worries at all. So yeah, The Veil. It's definitely an interesting film.
Oh,
You
thank you.
know, yeah. Where did this idea come from?
It's actually the synthesis of two very different ideas. One of which was an idea that I had been playing around with in my head for many years about a massive solar storm that knocks out all the power in Los Angeles. And beyond that really cool image, I didn't have a story. I just didn't know where it went. Um, and at the same time, I harbored this desire to do a really like classic spooky ghost story, kind of inspired by a story that I'd been told at camp as a young kid about a, a, a young bride murdered on her honeymoon in a cabin, and it just really creeped me out, and it just kind of stayed with me. And even then, I still could not crack that one either. I didn't know what it
Mm,
was beyond just the same movie you've seen 1,000 times. And I was recently back home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where my wife is from. I have family back there, and I was walking around outside of um, the countryside and kind of the suburban areas outside of Lancaster, and just surrounded in by a lot of the trappings of the Amish community, and that kind of got my mind going a little bit and thinking about the dramatic possibilities of something set within that world. And then it just kind of all clicked. Everything all kind of clicked together all at once. And I was off to the races from there. And the story just wrote itself.
right.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. So, what kind of time frame do you think that was?
Mm.
Well, I think from the initial seeds of the story until I hit, fade in on the first draft, that was easily 6 or 7 years. And then once we actually started going, um, you know, probably a matter of 6 or 7 months until we had a draft that we were ready to shoot with.
Uh, my part of the process wasn't quite that long. Certainly, I wasn't on this for 7 years. Cam actually went on a family outing the first time during the pandemic that he could get out to go with his wife and their child out to Lancaster and see the in-laws. And so I, of course, helped facilitate that by doing what I always do, which is babysitting his cat. And so I went to his house and I took care of his cat for a good 2 weeks while he was out in Lancaster. And when he and his wife got back, he said, Kyle, I have this script idea that sort of percolated out in Pennsylvania for me. Do you want to take a look? And I said, absolutely. We've been working together at this point almost 20 years. So we have a real shorthand. We've produced short films before this. I'll read anything he wants to send me. And what he sent me was amazing. It was really wonderful. The story about a priest in the middle of a solar storm with this stranger that shows up at his house. I think the biggest timeline shift for us was trying to nail the story of who this bride character was. She was an Amish bride, but we didn't know much more beyond that. And so
Mm,
I gave Cam this thought, well, let's figure out what her name is and start there. And we discovered that her name was Hannah, and Hannah sort of started telling us about her story. And there's this beautiful monologue in the middle of the movie. I don't want to spoil too much, but that's where a lot of Hannah came out, was inside Cam working that monologue. I've been developing scripts all over the place for years. But with Cam, it's an easy back and forth of here's a thought, here's a tweak, here's where you can really hone in on it. And Cam is such a brilliant writer that once the characters are in his head, they are almost immediately on the page. So once we discovered Hannah, it was a much quicker turnaround to actually getting it in production.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, because I think when I first saw Hannah, I thought she was maybe a like a, oh gosh, like an 18th century house servant or something. Because I'd forgotten all about the Amish, right? And then you're just like, oh, right, I get it. Because yeah, originally I thought, oh, it's set in the past, right? I thought it was that kind of thing. But then yeah, as it all unfolds, it's intriguing. It's definitely
Yeah.
intriguing.
Yeah, and that was a lot of the appeal for us as well. You know, their culture is such a timeless one that you could set a movie with them in any time period and it would still look relatively the same.
Yeah.
And when you have a movie like ours that is as concerned with the passage of time as it is in the story, it's just a really fascinating thing to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was actually one of the benefits of filming on location. We were surrounded by the Amish community where we filmed, just south of Lancaster, and it is part of the culture of the area. And so we sort of just on set leaned into that as much as we could. We got our actress Rebekah Kennedy talking with an ex-Amish individual for a while. That really helped her develop that character of Hannah. We used a few Amish businesses while we were there. So we were able to really incorporate, I think, an authentic approach to using our the Amish culture inside of our film.
Okay, so was it only ex-Amish people that you could consult with? Was there anyone, you know, in the current situation? I don't know what you would call it, but yeah, a practicing Amish, let's say. Was there anyone of that ilk that would talk?
The community of folks who are who stay in the Amish community, it's a really insular community. So that's they're not really open with how they interact on a personal level like that. But certainly, you know, I was able to speak with this Amish gentleman, Abraham, who we rented. We rented what we thought was going to be a scissor lift, you know, a small thing you could get at Home Depot that kind of goes up
Oh,
and you can
yeah,
put the
yeah,
camera
yeah.
on and get like second floor. And I talked with this gentleman who was introduced to me by the owner of the property we were on. He had done business with them. The Amish can use the phone. There's no using the phone or anything like that, but they don't drive.
Yes.
And so as I'm expecting the scissor lift to come, down our country lane comes this giant 18-wheeler. And on the back of the 18-wheeler is this giant gas crane. And it was a gas-powered lift, this Optimus Prime thing that we had to drive onto the backyard. But with that came this wonderful opportunity to capture shots that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to capture. And so he was really lovely to talk to. We had several conversations about the crane, about using it. So in that sense, we certainly were able to discuss with an Amish person as we were filming.
Okay. Interesting. That's good. That's good. Just on the once you got the idea for the story, right? And I think you said to about 6 to 7 months. Is that, you know, with your writing process, do you think that is oftentimes the time frame to develop that first draft of something?
I found that it varies wildly, at least with the scripts that I've written. If it's something that has been percolating for a little bit, it could go really quickly, but then all of a sudden it might stop. And kind of halt on a little snag that I haven't quite thought through, and it's bigger than I thought, and that takes another 7 months to work through it.
Mm.
Um, I think with the veil specifically, there was, coming out of COVID, there was a really strong desire on my part to really hunker down and get something out that I could then go out into the world and make. Because if there was one thing that was hammered into me during that whole episode of history, it's that tomorrow is not guaranteed. To At the risk of sounding hokey, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't squandering the time that I had, and
Mm.
I was towards that end. I was very focused with all the free time that I did have, which was very little, raising a small child. So that kept me focused, if it more than anything. I knew I had a set amount of time to do something, and I knew I had things to accomplish, and I think that was productive.
Okay. Now, I know you did a short film in 2019, but your last feature film was, oh gosh, that was 2012, right? So
Right, right.
was that also a factor? Like the fact that, you know, you know what I mean? It's not like you took a break from the creative side of things, but because it had been a while since you did a feature, was that also on your mind that, oh, I really want to get this done?
Absolutely. I was a little different from the other kids in film school in that my filmmaking activities centered around making feature length projects instead of shorts. Kyle and I met actually while shooting one of these very like homegrown feature length movies with no budget, just and I think what resulted in that gap, that 10-year gap, that did kind of weigh heavily, because when you have a certain way you like to be operating and you're just not operating at that capacity, that does weigh on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think with that feature and the one I had done before that, I had kind of reached the ceiling, because those were made for only like a couple $1,000s each, very, very micro budget. And to get to that next level, even that requires a lot of momentum and a lot of lift.
Mm.
And that was a 10-year process of actually kind of going back and figuring out who I was as a person. I had a lot more living I needed to do before I feel like I was ready to take on something of this magnitude. Um, to the degree that, I'm still even wondering if this might be the official debut, the official debut feature. It feels like that much of a difference in
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, the significant time span was a significant driving force. That's to be sure.
Mm. I think that's an interesting thing you said as well. Like the difference of making those lower budget films to this, and that you kind of look at it, it could be the actual debut because of the difference in the filmmaking. You know, like you've done shorts, you've done, TV, right? Like you've done different mediums. Have you noticed much of a difference in style and approach when it comes to those mediums, and how they then played into what you did with the veil?
Hmm. Well, the fundamental thing that connects them all is story. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's having the priority on telling the best story you possibly can. And on that previous feature 10 plus years ago, there was no story because there was no script. That was born of a challenge to make something completely improvised, and to really push myself into that extreme world. But I've always approached the question of style and approach from the perspective of what is the story at hand demand. What are the needs of the story? What are the needs of the genre? I try not to, at least consciously, I try not to impose like a specific, unique, individual style that I have. I'm sure that there is one that I'm not conscious of, but I don't try to. I'm not a Wes Anderson. Let's put it that way. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to impose everything into a contained thing. But you know, when the various scales of what you're making a project at does dictate the approach to a certain degree. Definitely, for sure.
Yeah, and just piling on that, I've had the joy of watching Cameron from the outside. You know, I have been different things with Cameron. I have been a co-writer with Cameron. I have been Cameron's actor. I have produced Cameron. I don't direct. So when it comes to the singular vision, Cam has always been really great at assessing the story that he wants and really finding the road to telling it. But one thing as a director that can be a fallacy that we all fall into at times is it's the auteur fallacy. The idea that it's one person making this and it's their vision the whole way through. There is no film, especially the Beyl, but even big films without a team behind you. And I think that was probably the biggest difference. For the first time, Cameron had, because of we found somebody who could help finance the film with us. Because of that, we could get a somewhat larger crew. Because we were in Pennsylvania, we could do a bit less. You know, it costs a little less than it costs to make film in California. We found really dedicated actors who were available and were affordable to us. So because of those things we had, Cam didn't have to do all of the lifting himself. He didn't have to take his vision forward, kicking and screaming until he got it right. He got to rely on people like me, our wonderful cast, Rebekah and Sean, just doing everything to bring his vision to life. And then the team that we built around Cam, they were just filled with, how can we help Cam achieve this wonderful vision that he's made? And that's really why this particular film is the thing we've been trying to make for 20 years. You know, you're never an overnight success unless it's 20 years in the making. And I think that with this film, that's kind of we're at the starting point for what's coming next.
Well, I think the interesting thing is a lot of the time, people who come out making, big noise with their debut thing, it's not always actually their debut thing. You know what I mean? I remember there were those there was that trilogy of books. It was I remember the first one was called Wall, right? It was Hugh Howey, I think the name.
Oh,
and they
I
turned
read
it
that,
into Silo. It's that Apple TV series called Silo, which is an adaptation of those books. And
it's a great show.
When they first came out, right, it was just like, new writer on the scene, blah, 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 blah. And I read the first book and I was like, yeah, this is good. Looking into it, he had a whole heap of other books, right? But it was just, that was the first one to get major, and even that one was initially self-published before a big publisher was like, actually, we'll take it, and then reissued it. But a lot of people would go, oh, that's his first book. And it's not, you know what I mean? It takes time, like there's a music award over here that I think it's the I think I'm thinking of the Mercury, right? And there's a best newcomer, and you look at that list, sometimes you'd be like, wait, that person's been in the game for 10 years. How the fuck are they on the best newcomer list? You know what I mean? It's always a weird one.
We just got Sabrina Carpenter's on the best new artist. I'm like, best new artist 5 years ago? Oh, okay. No, today.
Yeah, but
But you know
it,
what? That's the opportunity to fail too, and that's an
mm,
important part of the process. You cannot come out of the gate perfect, and I think
no,
anybody who tries to come out of the gate perfect is setting themselves up for failure. Whereas if you actually put yourself out there and fail a lot, eventually that will lead to an education, a
yes,
hands-on education that takes you to where you need to be. And Cam and I got to fail a lot before before we made Beyl.
mm.
This is true.
But I guess it's what you would call failing, right? Because there's a lot of times I'll watch a film and I don't particularly like it, but there's a lot of elements of it that I really do like, right? You
Mhm.
might watch it and be like, I mean, the editing's really good, right? Like, oh man, this was great casting. The score's incredible. Like the beginning of the film is great. It just has a horrible ending, right? A lot of times you can look at something and go, oh, yeah, there's definitely a framework here, right? You can definitely see a whole heap of promise in this filmmaker. You know what I mean? So it's just like, is that a fail or is that more just like a learning curve, until you hit that perfect situation where it all just comes together so well?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like any movie is a cumulative miracle. There are so many things that could go wrong at any given point on any given day. The fact that any movie exists at the end of the day is a miracle.
Mm,
And I try to keep that attitude with me when I'm in a position to be watching someone else's work or judging it or anything like that. And more so trying to gauge and figure out gauge it against what they were trying to do, what they were trying to communicate versus how it actually turned out. And I think
yeah.
that tells you a lot about an artist as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think it's really interesting when you have a director's statement, right? Because sometimes people are honest in the director's statement talking about what they were looking to do. And then from that, you can kind of go, yeah, I think they did that. Right. Or
Mhm.
they did part of that. It didn't fully translate, but you kind of get an idea of, what that aspiration was. And it's like, I'm just like, just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it's a bad film. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Mhm.
it's just not my cup of tea. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
there's a load of films that I just do not like. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Goonies. I hated E.T. But I might be the 1% because everyone else seems to love those films. You know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, some things work for some people, some things don't.
Yeah, we are the festival circuit that we went on made it very clear that how subjective the appreciation of film is, because we got to play in 4 different cities in the US and Canada, between Texas and Oregon and California and up north in Canada, and each crowd took it differently. We got different sorts of reviews every time. We went to a we world premiered at the HP Lovecraft festival up in Portland, and 400 people in that crowd, and they almost all stuck around to ask us questions afterwards. And it was just really great to have that kind of response to it. And then we've had, other, like, what did this mean? I thought that was stupid, those kinds of things. And that's what's great about film. Everybody gets to enjoy it or not enjoy it in their own way, and nobody's wrong about these things because it's how they
Mhm.
took what the piece of art was. That's what's good about art, and that's what the studios aren't chasing anymore. They're chasing being correct. They're chasing trying to make the fans happy or something like that. And we feel we just want to avoid that kind of nonsense and put something out, and however it's judged, we accept the judgment as long as
Mm.
it's fair. Let's be real. We didn't have $100 million to make this movie, so as long as we're being fair here.
Well, you say that. I've seen some odd things about the new Joker film, right? Because it seems so odd that I was just like, I can't even invest the time to read this article, because it was something along the lines of they intentionally made a bad film to teach the fans a lesson or something like that. And I was just like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all.
Well, that's the nice thing about Batman, though. We've got the main Batman, we've got Joker, and then we've got Penguin on. I didn't like Joker. I'm not really the biggest DC guy, but the new Penguin TV show is awesome. And so it's like there's something out there for everybody in a different style, and they're taking one story and working it 3 different ways. So I mean, I don't know about a crime musical that's all in the guy's head as a sequel, but like, hey, I don't have David Zaslav's number on my Rolodex either. So,
Well, we're actually going to get another Batman as well, because the Batman isn't set in the actual new DC universe. So I think the Brave and the Bold is going to be the actual DC universe Batman. So there's going to be a
you know
lot.
what? James Gunn, man, I will see whatever he puts out. I'll give him a shot. I'll see what he can do. He hasn't gone there yet.
Well, yeah, after that last Guardians film, I mean, whoa. I would definitely give his stuff a look. I've enjoyed the majority of what he's done. So I'm curious. And like yourself, I'm not really a huge DC fan. Well, I guess it's not so much a fan. It's just a lot of the characters and there's been some iterations of the characters that I have enjoyed, but I guess the majority, like the more mainstream ones, just don't always resonate, just because they just seem to have so much power. So I've always kind of been like, well, how can anyone beat Superman? Right? He can do all of these things. And especially someone without superpowers. You know what I mean? You're like, Lex is just a smart guy. You're saying Lex Luthor can beat Superman? I don't know about that.
I think that's why we love horror, because it's totally inverted in horror. You never think the person's going to make it, and when they do, it's like a special treat. Or if they don't, awesome. That's what we were looking for in the first place. So like with horror, we don't have any of those preconceptions.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Like, is horror the genre that kind of excites you both the most?
I think it's really exciting as a gateway to the larger world of genre, and the way that it plays so nicely with other genres like sci-fi, in the Beyls instance, or thrillers or mystery, even comedy. Like, those pairings go really well together. And the appeal for me personally is in how that allows for a much wider range of stories that you can tell. It really just opens it up, and it is, from a structure perspective or a thematic or even a narrative, it allows for a wider array of different characters from all sorts of different walks of life. It feels truly limitless, and I think that's a lot of the appeal.
We have another 3 films on the docket because of the Veil. We are seeing a little bit of success in the industry, and so people are asking what we're doing next. We're starting to have conversations about future films, and right now we have a psychological thriller. We have a horror with a dash of comedy to it, and then we have a very Mulholland Drive-y style body horror film that is like American Psycho with body horror. It's
Okay.
So like we're just pulling this stuff in. We have collaborators we work with. We're both writing our own scripts, and so yeah, horror is a fun playground to play in, and we get to. It is, like Cameron said, it's a little bit limitless in what you can do with horror. And as filmmakers and as artists, we kind of want to build a big play box first before we start setting boundaries for ourselves.
Right, right. I mean, when you kind of were playing around with the concept for the veil, like you had the solar flare idea, like was that idea always going to be horror, or was that more of a sci-fi thing, and then you kind of morphed it into what it has become?
Yeah, I mean the Aurora angle was always, even from that LA set iteration I talked about earlier, that was always had a much more of a sci-fi element to it. Um, One thing that I really liked about it is how it's this grounded natural phenomenon that we all know about and we can point to and say, here's the science of why this happens.
Mm,
But there's so much beauty and wonder to it and just enough chaos that it also kind of stokes your imagination about how can something like this exist in our world, like how what an amazing thing to exist. What else is out there that maybe we don't know about, we can't, it's beyond the limits of our perception. And that's where it kind of goes into the world of science fiction and the possibilities of the unknown. And that I think that's always been the inherent appeal of the Northern Lights for me personally. And I've just never seen it explored in other movies or even TV shows in the way that we do with the Veil. If it's window dressing at best, it's never an active part of the storyline. And I wanted to check out that narrative territory, you know.
hmm.
There's a Twilight Zone sensibility here that we wanted to play in, and I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of the horror elements came as the second part. When we had our first cut, we saw some things that if we could find spookier cuts, creepier cuts, more jarring cuts, that would actually enhance what we were trying to tell with our story. When we were afraid, we didn't want to go too far. We didn't want to detract from the humanity at the center, but I really think the end result is much more human because we added the extra amount of off kilter scariness to it.
Yeah, there was a weird kind of face thing going on. And get like there was one time with Hannah and another time with Donald. Donald?
Douglas, yeah,
Douglas.
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 Douglas, yes. Which was I remember when it first I was, yo, what the fuck just happened there? Like that was it. I'm just like, did I just see something? Like, what's happening? You know what I mean? Because I'm just like, I try not to watch horror films late at night. So I'm just like, wait, did I break the threshold? Is this too late? Am I seeing what's happening here?
That's a great compliment. Thank you. Too
Yeah.
scary to watch at night.
Oh man. Like when you screened this, you said, you know, you've had some different receptions to the film. What have been some of the, if you can remember, some of the points that have kind of stuck out to people, like without any spoilers, of course?
Mhm. Well, for sure, Hannah and Sean, sorry, Hannah and Douglas, the two characters, their relationship is so authentic because the acting that Rebekah Kennedy and Sean O'Brien were bringing to the table, it made everybody's job so easy. And they were in it the whole time. We shot in 10 days. They were just magical. And it really resulted in the audience. You know, our film's a bit of a slow burn.
Mm,
So there's a slower part at the beginning that leads into a bigger chaos in the second half. But that chaos is so vibrant, but you need the human condition first. And so we spent a
yeah,
lot of time
yeah,
setting that up. And so Hannah and Douglas's relationship was one of the things people were really focused on, how amazing that was in the midst of all this weirdness. And then so many people told us that when they were leaving and they were in the car going home, they would talk about it with their partners, trying to figure out what this meant and trying to figure out what this meant. They weren't bored by it. They weren't, you know, confused by it. They were engaged with it and still trying to figure it out, even if Cam and I didn't have an answer that was clean that they wanted. You know, I don't know about you, Cam. I don't know if anybody said anything else.
No, I mean that kind of, and that also speaks to, we got a lot of questions about the face aspect that you mentioned and what the meaning of that was. And we deliberately underplay those moments a little bit because we want to as storytellers, we want to respect the life experience that the audience has coming in and what that brings and adds to the story that we're telling. And in a weird kind of way, when you kind of scale back a little bit and you leave a little bit more room for interpretation than maybe what's like necessary, people will, the ones who are ready to engage with it, they will jump in and they're ready to pick it apart and to look for the meaning, and they will find the meaning because it's already in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been fascinating to watch, is the different interpretations.
Yeah, I kind of figured it must be a mash between time dilation and then it's like the situation. You know what I mean? And the fact that it's kind of retrograding itself, maybe from what initially happened to what is being tried to happen now. So you have this kind of, basically, you know what I mean? You're going against what Egon said and you cross the streams. You know what I mean? And so now.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a really fascinating interpretation for sure. Yeah.
I mean, sorry, Cam, go ahead.
Oh, no. And I think just to put a little button on it, I think that's the great thing about that approach is everybody is right. There's no wrong answer there.
Yeah.
The time dilation angle is cool. I think for me, I'm with you on that one, Kevin. I'm a big Star Trek fan, and so there's always been a slight essence of Star Trek in this because of, I mean, we use the night sky. I'm just going to say it right out. We had a brilliant DP, David Gordon, capturing all of this imagery, and then Cam adding the visual effects himself. He did all the VFX on this movie. He learned as he was going to do it, and the night sky, the stars, all of that is so gorgeous. And I get this just like wonderful Star Trek, and classic Star Trek kind of sensibility to it. And I think for me, the sciencey part of it is the thing that explains it. It's dilithium crystals. What's a dilithium crystal? It sounds sciencey, but what is it? It's magic, really, when you think about it. But that's the kind of thing we're playing with here. It's totally based in the authentic world of science, as long as your imagination can hold it.
Yeah. No, that is the joy of storytelling, when you can have those things that just create conversation. Yeah. Like there was one thing that I was curious about. And that is I guess we can talk about it, but it's like Douglas. Like from when we first meet him to where he then goes. So like, because we're with Will at the beginning. And because I'm assuming at that point he's on the path to priesthood. Because it made me wonder about his actions, which would then feed into, I think, the conversation he has when he goes on the call out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I wasn't quite sure, but I was like, when you think about like that whole, it's not a quick process. And you don't really hear of a lot of, say, 30, 40-year-olds going, I'm going to become a priest. You know what I mean? It's usually
Right.
a younger age. So I was thinking he must have been on that path at that point, which then kind of makes his actions like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? 'Cause it's
I mean, I'll be honest, Kevin. A lot of people haven't picked up that point. That's an important point about who young Douglas, who's played by Will Tranfo, who he is, and you've honestly assessed the situation quite accurately right there. He is in a point in his life, and Cameron, you could definitely speak more to this. I think he's a wonderful young version of Douglas, but he's at a point in his life where he's certainly contemplating life's meaning, and then this crazy situation happens where he wonders if he made the right decision. Cam, you want to jump in here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the question of whether or not he is already enmeshed in the priesthood and the studies for the priesthood at this point in the story is open to interpretation. It was important to me that this needed to be somebody who was already, their worldview was already inclined towards a life of service, towards helping people and wanting to be a person living for others. So because when he ultimately fails to do that, that is the worst possible thing that he could have done to both this person and also to himself. I deliberately wanted to stay away from anything that was too inflammatory is not the right word, but I didn't want him to have his foundational thing to be something so extreme that you could never get on board with him as a sympathetic person.
Yeah.
I wanted to give him something that we could all relate to, and that is definitely, we all have instances where we have fallen short of the ideal version of ourselves, of the standards that we hold ourselves to, because we're human. At the end of the day, we have flaws, and in a moment of extreme terror, it's very easy to forget yourself and to maybe choose the path of least resistance and to just get out of there, and it had to be someone where it's that choice, even if it's made under duress, would weigh on them really heavily to the point where they would have a lot of trouble moving on from it decades later.
Yes. And I think that then leads us in this really interesting situation, right? Of the events that are happening and the players involved. I feel that's that's probably the best way to frame that. And it's oh man, like it is that crazy thing, right? It's like how our actions can feed into what is to come and the possibilities of what could come.
Yeah, exactly.
We feel like, in our own lives, we try so hard to do the right thing, and sometimes we aren't paying attention to the signs around us telling us that we're just causing more problems as opposed to fixing it. And at least for me, that was something in the script that I really engaged with when Cam sent it to me, was this idea that a second chance is possible, but if you push too hard, that second chance may be the thing that ultimately brings you down.
Yes.
And so figuring out how regret fit in, figuring out how the desire to find your humanity through service, but also at the same time, you might cause yourself a little pain and horror, in fact, if you don't listen to those around you. And so this movie is as much about a cautionary tale as it is about somebody escaping, in terms of the Hannah character, escaping where a situation where she was being abused. So that it's like two together to create this one story arc. And that's the wonderful thing about, again, using time. Time is really something that if you make it a cycle, then you can, as a filmmaker, really play with consequences of actions and see how they play out and see if you can do it again, which I think Cam did a brilliant job with.
Yeah, like, how easy was it, like, getting that nuance right in the script and the story?
It was actually fairly difficult, and I think that might have resulted in one of the longest delays in from conception to actually physically writing, because certain the way that the story needed to go was so present to me from the beginning that it almost felt like, is this too simple? Is this too simple of a story? Is it even worth telling? Will people see this coming a mile away? And then after setting it aside for a little bit, it's digging back into it and finding that the characterization is what gives it the nuance and what gives it the opportunity and makes it worth telling. Especially because you're dealing with a pair of protagonists who aren't really part of the world that you and I live in on a day-to-day basis. They are kind of removed from it to varying degrees. And that has so much dramatic potential, especially, and this was something that I didn't realize until I was in the active research phase. And the more I did research into this, the more I fell into like, this movie needs to be made. This is so natural of a subject to kind of play around with. The Amish were persecuted by the Catholics, like in the 1600s, to a really horrible degree, and the generations of Amish through the centuries have been passing down the story of that trauma through a book called Martyr's Mirror. And when I was talking about this with there was a priest out in Pennsylvania that I was talking on the phone with as research, and he had no idea, absolutely no idea about this history. It was never taught to him. It was never taught to me in however many years of Catholic school, grade school that I had. And it was so fascinating to hear those stories and to realize that history really is written by the victors. And history is just, it can be a one-sided thing where the fullness of the human experience isn't fully accounted for. It's bearing the ghosts of our past in a way. And there's, if there's one thing that history is good for, it's a ghost story,
I mean, that doesn't really surprise me, right? Because when you look at the church and the Catholic Church, there's so many like atrocities and just crazy situations that aren't really talked about. I mean, just remember, like as a kid, you'd hear about Richard the Lionheart, right? And the Crusades, and it sounded like this real noble effort to, save people and fight against tyranny and just all. Then you actually learn what it was. And it's not that story, right? It's just not that thing. And so you have that, right? And you have, when you look at a lot of other religions, not all of them, but a good chunk of them, there are more than one God, right? It's like there's several gods, which, to be honest, always made more sense to me. Is, I mean, with you guys, you've got a president, we got a prime minister, and they clearly can't do the jobs, right? One person isn't built to do all of that. So having one God doing everything, it always just like, I always just looked at like the Norse and the Greek legends and things like that and thinking, yeah, that makes more sense, right? But Christianity seems to be like, no. Our God is the only God. So we're going to go and mess you up because we want you to believe in our one God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like, them persecuting the Amish, not really a surprise. And then you just look at all the other atrocities. A lot were coming out during lockdown with child abuse and all of that. And it's, I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other day, really. And it, like, it's always bizarre to me that the church is still a thing. Because, I mean, look at the US Gymnastics Association. And when it all came out of all the abuse that was happening to those girls, right? In the end, they just disbanded it because they're just like, you know, that kind of atrocity, that kind of behavior doesn't work in a silo, right? More than one person knows. So if all of these people knew and did nothing, this can't work as an organization, right? So they disbanded it. And it's just like, other things, people lose their jobs and all of this, but the church seems to be the one thing where it's just like, okay, yeah, we'll do better. And that seems to be it. Like there's no change, right? It's not like, right, we need to get a new pope in, or we need to get rid of all the priests from this era because they could all be culpable with this bit. Oh, it's just like, okay, well, yeah, on to the next one. So
Well,
it's just
that's a thread we worked on with Hannah. You know, she is escaping her insular community where she's been abused. And one of the key points for her is that it's not just her husband, it's the people who are enabling her husband to do what he does.
Yeah.
And, it's for us, that was an important part, that even though we didn't want to shake a stick at either Catholicism or Mennonites, we did want to put this in human terms of what each person was because of how they were brought up. And so I think that was an important part of the process, to be authentic and careful, but also know that these are two real people stuck in a real situation that just happens to have horror and sci-fi around it, but ultimately is down to a young woman running away from an abusive situation in her insulated religious community and not finding the help that she needs.
And I think, everyone has heard those stories, right? Like whether, and it's not just, Catholicism or, the Amish community. Like we've heard it in the Jewish community. We've heard about it in the like Hindi community, the Muslim community. Like it's in a lot of these communities where, it's like frowned upon to get divorced, like, you should, just work better to make, this happen, or just turn a blind eye because, they're not leaving you. So it's all fine. And yeah, so we've this isn't I think an out there situation where people can't wrap their heads around it. So I think that's what makes it even worse, right? Because this is a reality for a lot of people.
Yeah, we being able to work with an ex-Amish woman on some of this, she experienced this herself. Oh, not the story that we're telling necessarily, but a lot of how she decided to leave the community, because the Amish are all given that opportunity. And before you accept, you're given the opportunity to leave, and she happened to leave. Hannah, as a character, has accepted her to stay and has had second thoughts now because of the situation. So because of that, it is a slightly, it's such an interesting thing that I, as who I am, I never have to think about something like that. So putting ourselves in her shoes, and Cameron, really assessing who she was from this, it gave her a voice that I hope other people in a situation like this, if they're able to see it, will get a little spark of insight from.
Yeah, and the story really drills home the actions from the start of the film as well, which like, and it's that odd, and I feel it's that odd thing as well, right? Where do you really need to know this to do the right thing at the start. You know what I mean? It's just like, shouldn't it just be the person in need, right? Like, do we need the backstory? But then again, when we look at things, it's the backstory that oftentimes is the thing that finally makes people do, take action to something. Right? Because like, how many times have we seen people like, oh, that's rubbish. No. And then you're like, oh, right, we should write a petition. We should do this. We should do that. And it's just like, well, shouldn't that be the reaction from the start? Like, did you need to know more to do the right thing?
Yeah, and it's some of that. We put that in. We don't want to spoil anything, but in the ending, there is a tiny bit of. There has to be a little bit of selfishness on the part of someone who is helping, and we played into that a little bit. So even at the end, we're not letting Douglas off the hook. We are saying he's going to have to, if he wants to be the person he truly thinks he can become, and that he wanted to be in the first place, he's going to have to work for it. And I think, again, without giving too much away, we do put that charge. It's up to him to decide how he's going to go forward.
Yeah. Like, was the, crafting the ending of this, like, how easy was that to come about? Because like, did you envision like other endings? How what this was?
I think there was an alternate ending in the first couple of drafts that never quite felt right. It brought us to all the places we needed to be, and all the places that the film ends up, albeit in kind of different permutations. But it really kind of came down to the significant, in a weird way, the covered bridge became this visual totem. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. The covered bridge became this visual totem that suddenly became important to the storytelling. And when I found that if I oriented the ending around that kind of framework, that's when it clicked into place. That's was like this is where it has to be. This is it's the perfect location for this. And that's when I knew we had the right ending.
Right. Yeah, I did think that, I mean, it everything transpired well, right? Like, it can't be. Yeah, let's just say I wasn't disappointed with the ending. I feel that yeah.
That's good.
Very well put, Kevin.
Yeah, sometimes with these things, like, you have to be so careful with what you say, because you don't want to even, because it's like, did you see Us, right? The Jordan Peele film.
That's the only one of his I haven't seen yet.
Same here.
I know. I've literally got him right here, so I should probably know.
Okay. I really enjoyed that film. It's creepy. It's creepy. There's some funny bits in it. Like, I really enjoyed it. And like, I'll watch a film, I'll do the review, but then when I'm like putting all the information on the website, I have to look for the trailer and the cast and all this kind of thing. So I found a trailer, and I was doing something, so I just let it play. And the trailer, do not watch the trailer, guys. That's all I gotta say to you, because I feel it leads the audience to a place where you might start to ponder.
Mm.
And I think the joy of it was just not knowing anything,
Mm.
you know. And I try to avoid trailers when possible, because I really enjoy going into something just not really having any idea of what the hell I'm gonna watch, you
Mm.
know. So yeah, I think huh. I kind
I
of
just want to say I'm the same way, and we have put out so much footage from the film between trailer and exclusive clips, and I'm like, just go just see the movie. You will get so much more out of just what, and it's only 70 minutes long, so it's not even a big. We're not doing Nolan films here, you know. It's an in and out, and you'll have some opinions, and hopefully enjoy yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, I cannot remember why I talked about Us. I know it was something about information but yeah, I'm no, I'm drawing a blank.
So I don't know if it's too early or too late over there, but it's too something.
Oh man. But no, I did think, well, you know, even watching this, I didn't really have a clue of what it is, you know, because yeah, I just got hit up about it, and I'm just like, you know, you work with a lot of like agencies, and you know the type of stuff they send you, so it's just like, yeah, okay, I'll give this a watch, you know. So it was yeah, I wasn't quite sure what it was gonna be, but I was happily, yeah, intrigued and surprised by you know, what this was. So I think you did a great job on the film, guys.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Kevin.
That means a lot.
Yeah, that's huge. We appreciate that. We always wonder if anybody ever likes what we put out. So the fact to hear that you liked it and engaged with it, and just on a whim too, we deeply appreciate that.
Oh, no worries. Like, yeah, I thought the cast just worked really well, you
Yeah,
know,
they did.
and it was this, you know, just that chemistry between everyone was great. Like, how did you, you know, help build that? Like, what kind of things do you put in place? Do you use like visual cues, like music, you know, film references? Like, what kind of information do you give to the cast?
Well, the first thing is we have a very strong no assholes policy.
Mhm.
We don't want to work with people who aren't fun to work with. And with Sean and Rebekah, they're super fun to work with. And they had just met on that set, and they struck up an almost instant chemistry. So that actually made everything pretty easy. They were so trusting of each other. And because Cam is such a nice person and such a kind director, he never shouts, he never raises his voice. He, you know, if he's panicked, it's because he's panicked about something he's doing, not about what anybody else is doing. And so it gave them a lot of space to just work. And my job was to facilitate Cam having the space to give them space. So really, it was just about the people who we could find that we could trust would do the work, and we could have open communication about it as it went forward. And we were really fortunate to have that on this set.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm going to say, as his producer, it was Cam who set that tone, and it just went into everybody else. So it's Cam's style is very professional and very kind to fellow artists, and I think that's the only way we ever want to make movies.
Now, with, you know, the Douglas character, because we see him as his younger self and then his older self, like, was there anything particular you were looking for when you cast Will and Sean in the role, and information that you told them to, you know, really nail that characterization?
Well, so funnily enough, Whale came in after we had finished shooting. Um, his sequences were the product of a reshoot day that we did here in Los Angeles to, get some loose ends and to fix a few things and make up for some lost footage that we didn't get on the last day. And a big part of that is our original actor, due to scheduling, he fell out and we had to suddenly reshoot all of those scenes. And Rebekah actually brought Will into the mix. She had worked with him before on a film, and he was so ready to just jump into it, even just for a day's worth of shooting. And he had access to uh, a cut of the film, an early cut of the film, so he could see how the character was 40, 50 years later. And then he had the backstory as well. So he could kind of see where he was at that age that he was playing. Um, and I think I don't think he was trying to actively emulate Sean in any particular way, in any of his mannerisms or anything like that. He just kind of brought his own interpretation to the character. And I felt like that was the right choice because we are such vastly different people. I'm a vastly different person than the guy I was when I met Kyle almost 20 years ago.
Mm.
And, you multiply that by a factor of 3 or 4, and yeah, you're going to have someone that's almost recognizable, but the same person. What matters though was that kind of dramatic through line that is the essence of the character, and they both captured that really well.
Oh man, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the casting was really great, and it helped, bring this film to life. So that was, yeah, perfect. Yeah. Like, how hard was it to do the VFX? Because when I read that you did the VFX, I just assumed that was part of your background. But then when Carl was like, you were learning as you went, I was like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, no, that was well, I'll preface it by saying that I wouldn't have set out to make this movie if I didn't know it couldn't be done.
Mm.
I had a working knowledge of um, how it could be done, and how I might direct a VFX artist down the line to do it if we were able to hire one. And at the end of the day, it just kind of came down to maintaining that through line of storytelling on my end, and it meant watching a lot of YouTube tutorials. And you notice that everybody has the same cadence and how they and how they teach these things. And
we also had we had a wonderful VFX consultant. Her name is Elena Scott, here in Los Angeles, who I met on Twitter of all places. I'm not calling it anything besides Twitter. She was lovely, coming in and just helping Cam develop his skills as he went. Because she has experience with Marvel VFX and other shows like that. She was able to come in and just, but 100% of the hands-on stuff is Cam, and it's really incredible what he was able to do in just a few short months.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But yeah, that must be a great for moving forward with other projects. Now you've got that knowledge in the arsenal.
Yeah, we're gonna put the VFX. We're gonna figure out what our VFX are before we start shooting, as opposed to once everything's in the can. That'll be nice arrangement of processes.
Yeah, I hear that's a good approach.
Yeah, we're learning.
Oh man, so now it's all said and done, what's the biggest takeaway, I guess, from this whole process for you both?
I'll speak while Cam thinks of his answer. For me, it's just saying you're doing something and seeing what happens. We started out as a $10,000 Seed and Spark campaign. We were just going to make this no matter what. to make this story. We were going to raise $10,000 and make it. And because we put it out that we were making this story, other people asked to get involved. And because they asked to get involved, our resources grew, our crew that we were able to use grew, the places that we could eventually take the movie to try to get it distributed grew. And all of that came from us just saying, here is what we are doing. I hope you can get involved. So that was for me.
Yeah, and actually, you know, I would have to agree with Kyle there. I think it's just the power of manifesting, you know, stating your desire to make something and your intent to make something, and leaning on the creative community around you to help you and to collaborate with them on a vision. I think it's bringing people into the process it results in the real magic of filmmaking, and that was a huge takeaway.
Awesome. So yeah, you've got 3 films on the docket. Like, is there one in particular that you think will be the next, you know, to go into actual production?
It will depend on which one gets the resources first, but I have written a script that's the horror film Barbarian meets Poltergeist. So it's another ghosty story, this time with a bit more of that, a bit more unsettling than this one, I guess. But there's also a strain of comedy to it that we hope really enlivens the audience. We're trying to go take what we've learned as a small ball independent filmmaker, and now we're getting a bit more into a larger, still independent approach to it. And people have been reading the script. They've been really enjoying it. So I think we're going to probably be able to put that team together first.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. You might say there's some comedy in it, but I'm still going to watch it during the day. I'm just letting you know.
It's probably the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this has been great. I really appreciate you giving me your time, man, to talk about, you know, the Beyl and all things that helped bring it to life. This has been fantastic.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for having us.
It's been great and amazing. We're so happy that you liked the film. So thank you for watching it and having us on.
I mean, it's easy to like something that's good, right? You know what I mean? So it's all on you guys, man.
Thank you for that.
No worries, man. Like, let people know how they can keep track of everything you're doing, and obviously how they can go see the Beyl.
Well, the Beyl is currently on. I'll do my spiel, Cam. The Beyl is currently on video on demand. If you can get Apple TV or Amazon or Fandango or Hoopla, it's going to be on one of those services. Even if you just have cable, it's on cable on demand. As far as where you can find us, Instagram, we're trying to build our Instagram following. We are at Film Frontier Studios. You can also still find us on Twitter for now, at Film Frontier LLC. And then I guess we're going to maybe do TikTok. I don't know. That's what the kids are doing these days. So we're getting a bit more TikTok, and we're at Film Frontier Studios on that as well. And then our website, big surprise here, filmfrontierstudios.com.
Ha! I didn't see that one coming.
You're having shock. That's why we do the horror, Kevin.
Superb. Well, people, make sure you go check out Cameron, check out Kyle, and most definitely go check out the Beyl. I mean, yeah, Halloween's coming up, right?
Yeah. Spooky season.
31 days of horror. It's got to fit in there somewhere.
Yeah, so you know, definitely you could add the Beyl to your watch list, people. So yeah, go do that. But yeah, gentlemen, this has been a pleasure, and I hope you will stop by when the next film is ready to talk about.
Absolutely, we'll be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Again, yeah, it's been a pleasure. All right.
Great.
Same. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
It easy.
Bye.
Bye.